There is a tragedy unfolding quietly in ordinary lives. Not failure, but something far more dangerous. Men and women grow older, not wiser, busier, not stronger. And one day they realize the enemy was never outside them. It was never mastered. Most people believe they are in control of their lives. They make plans. They work long hours. They endure pressure. They tell themselves they are doing what must be done. And yet, something feels wrong. Not dramatically wrong, quietly wrong. A sense that effort is being spent, but direction is missing. That motion is happening, but command is absent. This is the hidden problem few ever name, because naming it would demand responsibility. You see, according to the philosophy I am explaining to you, life does not defeat people from the outside first. It conquers them from within. Long before circumstances tighten, long before money becomes scarce, long before opportunity seems unfair, there is a private loss of control, not over events, but over self. Most people never master themselves, and because of that, everything else masters them. Their moods decide their actions. Their fears decide their limits. Their habits decide their future. They wake up each morning believing the world will demand discipline from them, when the real demand has always been internal. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people spend their lives avoiding. You do not need more opportunity. You do not need more time. You do not need better circumstances. You need command. Command over thought. Command over impulse. Command over fear. And this is where self-betrayal quietly begins. You promise yourself you will begin tomorrow, and you believe yourself. You tell yourself you are almost ready, and you accept the excuse. You know what must be done, yet you negotiate with comfort. This negotiation feels harmless. It feels human. It feels justified. And that is precisely why it is so dangerous. Napoleon Hill referred to this state as drifting, not laziness, not stupidity, not weakness. Drifting is the absence of self-mastery. It is living without a firm grip on your own direction. Drifting people often appear responsible. They show up. They stay busy. They fulfill obligation. But internally, they are being led by habit, led by environment, led by other people's expectations, led by fear they rarely admit to themselves. And the tragedy is not that they struggle. The tragedy is that they grow accustomed to it. They normalize frustration. They normalize delay. They normalize unrealized potential. They tell themselves, this is just how life is. No, this is how life is without self-mastery. Consider this carefully, and do not rush past it. Who decides when you act? Who decides when you stop? Who decides what you tolerate? Who decides what you avoid? If the answer is emotion, if the answer is fatigue, if the answer is fear of discomfort, then you are not directing your life. You are reacting to it. History does not remember reactive individuals. The men who altered industries, the thinkers who bent circumstances, the leaders who stood unshaken under pressure, they shared one quiet trait. They governed themselves before attempting to govern outcomes. Andrew Carnegie did not stumble into power. He decided, then disciplined his mind to obey that decision. Henry Ford was not spared doubt. He simply refused to let doubt make decisions for him. This is not mythology. It is law. The mind that cannot command itself will always submit to something else. And here is where discomfort deepens. Most people sense this truth. They feel it late at night, in quiet moments, when distractions fade. They know there is a version of themselves that acts decisively, that does not bargain with fear, that does not postpone what matters. And yet, they do not become that person. Why? Because self-mastery is not inspiring. It is demanding. It requires you to act when motivation is absent, to remain steady when emotion fluctuates, to hold to purpose when comfort tempts you to release it, And so the mind resists. It invents explanations. It seeks permission. It delays. Procrastination in this philosophy is not a scheduling problem. It is an identity problem. It is the refusal to see yourself as the authority over your own behavior. And every time you delay a necessary act, you reinforce the belief that you are not in control. This belief compounds quietly, until one day, years have passed, effort has been spent, and mastery has never been claimed. That is the silent loss most people suffer, not poverty, not failure, but self-abdication. And here is the tension you must sit with now. If the problem is not lack of effort, if the problem is not lack of intelligence, if the problem is not lack of opportunity, then the problem is far closer than most are willing to face. Because the same force that has limited you is the only force that can free you. And most people never confront it. Most people believe they fail because life is unfair, because resources are limited, because competition is fierce, because timing was wrong. Those explanations are comforting. They remove responsibility. They protect the ego, but they are not true. Effort fails for one reason only, because effort is being commanded by fear. Not fear in its dramatic form, not panic, not terror, but quiet fear, respectable fear. The kind that disguises itself as caution, as practicality, as realism. This is the enemy most people never identify, because it does not announce itself as fear. It calls itself being sensible. It calls itself waiting for the right moment. It calls itself not wanting to make a mistake, and so it remains in control. You see, in Napoleon Hill's philosophy, fear is not an emotion. It is a decision maker. Fear decides when you begin. Fear decides how far you go. Fear decides what you attempt publicly and what you keep locked away as potential. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people do not lack discipline. They lack courage to discipline themselves against fear. They know what must be done. They feel it clearly. But when the moment arrives, fear steps forward and whispers a question. What if this does not work? And discipline retreats. Fear asks, what will people think? And discipline softens. Fear suggests, wait until you feel more confident. And discipline postpones itself into invisibility. This is why effort alone never transforms a life. Because effort without mastery still obeys fear. You can work endlessly and still avoid the one action that would change everything. You can stay busy and never move forward. You can exhaust yourself and still remain exactly where fear feels safe. This is the internal conflict most people live with, whether they admit it or not. They want growth, but they fear exposure. They want freedom, but they fear responsibility. They want success, but they fear the discipline success demands. And so they compromise. They choose partial effort, selective discipline, comfortable ambition, enough action to feel productive, but not enough to feel vulnerable. Enough dreaming to feel hopeful, but not enough commitment to feel accountable. This compromise feels harmless, but it slowly destroys self-trust. Because every time you fail to act on what you know is right, your mind records the evidence. It learns something about you. It learns that your intentions are negotiable, that your resolve has conditions, that fear outranks decision. And once the mind learns this, it repeats it. Napoleon Hill warned that fear, left unchallenged, becomes habit, and habit left unexamined becomes destiny. Fear of failure keeps you from beginning. Fear of criticism keeps you from standing firm. Fear of poverty keeps you clinging to what you already know. And the most dangerous fear of all, the fear of discovering what you might be capable of if excuses were no longer allowed. Because if you truly mastered yourself, you could no longer blame circumstances. And that level of responsibility is terrifying to the undisciplined mind. History quietly confirms this truth. Thomas Edison failed publicly more times than most people fail privately, but fear never commanded his persistence. Abraham Lincoln faced ridicule that would silence ordinary men, but fear never authored his decisions. These individuals were not fearless. They were self-governed. They felt fear and acted anyway. That is the difference most people never internalize. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear decide. Self-discipline, at its core, is the practice of removing fear from authority, not eliminating it, not denying it, but demoting it. When fear is allowed to decide, you drift. When discipline decides, you direct. And here is the tension tightening now. If fear has been deciding your actions, if comfort has been negotiating your commitments, if delay has been shaping your outcomes, then the enemy is no longer external. It is internal, habitual, conditioned, which means it will not surrender politely, because fear does not release control easily. And before mastery can be claimed, something else must break. Not circumstances, not people, but the story you have been telling yourself about why you cannot yet act. And that breaking point is closer than you think. There comes a moment in every serious life when explanations stop working, not because they disappear, but because they no longer convince you. This is the break point, the moment when the mind can no longer escape itself. Up until now, there has always been a reason, a justification, a delay that sounded reasonable enough to accept. But something begins to fracture. You start to notice a pattern, not in circumstances, but in yourself. Different years, different situations, different goals, same hesitation, same postponement, same internal resistance, and slowly, uncomfortably, the truth emerges. The obstacle has not been the world. It has been the absence of self-command. This realization does not arrive loudly. It arrives quietly, almost painfully. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You begin to understand that knowledge was never the missing piece. You already knew what to do. Motivation was never the missing piece. You felt inspired many times. Opportunity was never the missing piece. Chances appeared and passed. What was missing was decision reinforced by discipline. This is the moment Napoleon Hill described as the end of drifting. Not when success arrives, but when illusion collapses. Drifting ends when the mind is forced to confront itself without excuses. And this confrontation is uncomfortable, because the mind resists responsibility the way the body resists pain. It searches for escape. It says, be patient. It says, circumstances will change. It says, you are different, but the pattern remains. And then comes the most dangerous thought of all. What if nothing changes unless I do? That thought threatens the entire structure of avoidance. Because if that is true, then delay is no longer harmless. It is destructive. Then procrastination is no longer a habit. It is a betrayal. Then fear is no longer protection. It is a prison. At this breakpoint, something else becomes clear. You have been negotiating with yourself. You made discipline conditional. You obeyed only when it felt comfortable. You acted only when confidence arrived first. But confidence does not precede discipline. Confidence follows it. This is the reversal most people never understand. They wait to feel ready and remain waiting forever. They wait to feel certain and never move. They wait for fear to disappear, and fear grows stronger through obedience. At the breakpoint, the mind must choose, not between success and failure, but between authority and surrender. Either you decide that your emotions no longer outrank your intentions, or you accept a life governed by reaction. There is no neutral ground. This is why most people retreat at this stage, because it demands something terrifying. Not effort, identity change. You must stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and begin seeing yourself as someone who decides. Trying negotiates, deciding commands. Trying listens to mood, deciding issues orders. Trying explains failure, deciding corrects behavior. This shift feels violent to the undisciplined mind because it removes the safety net of excuse. It removes the comfort of blaming timing, or people, or conditions. It places responsibility exactly where it belongs, on you. This is why the break point is avoided. Because once crossed, you can no longer claim ignorance. You can no longer pretend you did not know better. You now understand that every time you avoid a necessary action, you are reinforcing a self-image of weakness. And every time you act despite resistance, you are constructing a self-image of command. The mind believes what behavior proves. This is autosuggestion in its most powerful form. Not words repeated in hope, but actions repeated in defiance of fear. And here is the truth that makes this moment unavoidable. You are always training your mind, either to obey impulse or to obey purpose. There is no pause button. Every decision strengthens one side. At the break point, you finally see the cost of drifting, not just lost achievement, but lost self-respect. Because nothing erodes confidence like knowing you could have acted, and did not. This realization is painful, but it is also liberating, because it means the solution is not external. It is not distant. It is not reserved for the gifted. It begins the moment you reclaim authority over yourself. But authority cannot be borrowed. It must be taken, and taking it requires something most people avoid until life forces it upon them. Faith. Not faith in outcome. Faith in your ability to discipline yourself before evidence appears. That is the threshold, and once crossed, nothing remains the same. Because the moment you stop negotiating with fear, fear begins to lose its voice. And the next stage is not struggle. It is reconstruction. Once fear is removed from authority, it does not leave a vacuum. Something else must replace it, because the mind will always obey a ruler. If not fear, then faith. Not blind faith. Not emotional optimism, but disciplined belief. Faith, in the philosophy I am explaining to you, is not a feeling. It is a decision to act before proof arrives. This is where most people misunderstand transformation. They believe discipline is created by willpower. It is not. Willpower is unstable. It rises and falls with energy, mood, and circumstance. Discipline is created by belief reinforced through action. You begin to believe you are capable of command only after you issue commands to yourself and obey them. This is why the replacement phase feels unnatural at first. You are no longer waiting for motivation. You are no longer negotiating with comfort. You are no longer consulting fear. You act because you decided, and the mind must follow. At first, the mind resists. It questions you. It says, this is unnecessary. It says, you can rest today. It says, nothing terrible will happen if you delay. But you do not argue. You act, and something remarkable begins to occur. Each disciplined action becomes a message, a quiet but powerful autosuggestion. It says, I am the authority here. Not loudly, not dramatically, but repeatedly, and repetition is what reprograms belief. This is why Napoleon Hill placed such emphasis on autosuggestion, not as affirmations spoken into emptiness, but as thoughts anchored by behavior. The mind believes what you prove to it. One early morning kept, one task completed without negotiation, one promise honored despite resistance. Each one weakens fear's influence, each one strengthens faith. This faith is not abstract, it is grounded in evidence you have created. You begin to trust yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of all mastery. Without it, ambition collapses under pressure. With it, pressure sharpens focus. This is also where definiteness of purpose becomes alive. Purpose without discipline is fantasy. Discipline without purpose is exhaustion. But when discipline serves a definite aim, energy aligns. You no longer scatter effort. You no longer chase distractions. You no longer mistake movement for progress. Your actions become selective, deliberate. You begin to say no without guilt. You begin to endure discomfort without resentment. You begin to measure choices against purpose, not pleasure. This is the internal shift most people never reach, because it demands consistency without applause. No one sees the early discipline. No one praises it. No one rewards it immediately. But internally, something stabilizes. Your emotions no longer swing wildly. Your confidence becomes quieter, deeper. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and start asking, "Is this aligned with my aim?" That question alone eliminates countless distractions. This is where the mastermind principle quietly enters, not as a group of people, but as alignment of thought. Your mind stops arguing with itself. Desire, belief, and action begin moving in the same direction. When this alignment forms, resistance weakens. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become firmer. Rockefeller did not dominate an industry through chaos. He did it through order, order of thought, order of habit, order of execution. That order begins internally, and here is the most subtle transformation of all. You stop seeking permission from others, from circumstances, from your own moods. You do what must be done because it must be done. This is not aggression, it is authority. Quiet, stable, unshakable. Faith replaces fear not through hope, but through proof. Proof you manufacture daily by keeping small promises to yourself, and those small promises compound. Until one day, discipline no longer feels heavy, it feels natural. And fear, once so loud, becomes background noise. It still speaks, but it no longer decides. And now one final shift remains, because mastery is not loud. It does not announce itself. It reveals itself through calm power. And that power changes how the world responds to you. By now, the landscape of your mind has changed. Not violently, not with fanfare, but steadily, silently, irrevocably. The person who once waited for motivation now acts without it. The person who once negotiated with fear now commands attention from themselves first. The person who once drifted through days now moves with purpose. This is quiet power. It does not shout. It does not seek applause. It does not crave recognition. It manifests in every decision, every moment, every action, because it is rooted in self-mastery. This is the ultimate truth Napoleon Hill taught. Success begins within, not with circumstances, not with wealth, not with chance. It begins with you. Self-discipline separates the winners from the losers. The winners are not always the smartest. They are not always the fastest. They are not always the luckiest. They are the ones who command themselves. They know that the mind left undisciplined is the most dangerous enemy a human can face. They know that every delay, every negotiation with fear, every postponed action erodes confidence, erodes self-respect, erodes destiny, and they do not allow it. Quietly, deliberately, they choose. They define their purpose and obey it. They honor commitments to themselves when no one is watching. They act first and let circumstances follow. This discipline radiates. It is subtle yet unmistakable. It is felt before it is seen. It influences others not through force, but through the undeniable weight of a controlled life. Think of men like Andrew Carnegie. Think of Henry Ford. Think of Thomas Edison. Think of Abraham Lincoln. Not because they were invincible, but because they were self-governed. They endured criticism, scarcity, doubt, and failure, and yet they moved relentlessly toward their definite purposes. Because nothing external could command them. They had already commanded themselves. And now, you see, the truth is unavoidable. All the success, respect, independence, and meaning you desire is contingent on one thing: you. Your command of yourself. Your refusal to let fear, comfort, procrastination, or emotion dictate your life. Your ability to act when hesitation tempts you, to persist when effort feels heavy, to remain aligned with purpose when distractions scream. This is mastery. This is quiet power. This is permanent transformation. It is not dramatic. It is not flashy. It is consistent. It is relentless. And here is the lasting promise of self-discipline. Once you govern yourself, nothing else can govern you. Circumstances may challenge you. People may oppose you. Obstacles may arise. But no force outside can prevail over the mind that is disciplined, trained, and aligned with purpose. Most people never master themselves. They drift, they negotiate, they delay, and they fade. You can be different. Not because you are luckier, smarter, or stronger, but because you refuse to surrender to fear, because you refuse to negotiate with delay, because you refuse to allow impulse to outweigh purpose. And once that refusal becomes habitual, once it becomes identity, once it shapes every thought, every action, every day, you are free. Not free from difficulty, but free within difficulty. Not free from responsibility, but free in your response. Not free from uncertainty, but free in your command over it. That is the ultimate power. That is the life most people never experience. That is the legacy of those who refuse to drift. Because winners are not created by chance. They are created by command, by discipline, by unyielding control over themselves. And now the question rests with you. Will you continue to drift, or will you begin to master yourself today, in every moment, in every choice? Because mastery is quiet, but its effects are eternal, and that is the difference between winners and losers.